So I see a bunch of us white people talking about how we need to come together, and stealing and murder are both crimes, and invoking Martin Luther King's name to justify condemning the protesters' actions that are dominating our country's consciousness at the moment. Now, those who are opposing the condemnations of what is occurring in Minneapolis and elsewhere, meaning looting and so on and so forth, are not condoning those actions, looting or property damage or arson, as responsible and acceptable forms of behavior. The objections are over where and how much of the outrage is placed from those who have a lot of power and influence, the white community, and from the media. And this misplacement ultimately undermines the most significant and pressing problem behind why we're even having this conversation, why protests like this occur, and so on and so forth. Before I go further, keep in mind there are different tiers of crimes ranging in their severity. This is not controversial. It is literally enshrined in all of our laws. Pickpocketing is not the same as rape. If you look at how charges are actually brought, there are different degrees because not all actions in the same context are even on the same level. Okay, this is true for respective violent crimes. There's first-degree murder, second-degree murder, third-degree murder, for example. Now, that is not to say, go back to the pickpocketing rape example, that pickpocketing is good, but it sure ain't rape. This is my point. George Floyd, a human being, was murdered in cold blood on camera. He was bleeding for his life, and those who were supposed to protect him suffocated him, literally. A murder occurred, and I see more coverage from the media, outrage over what is overwhelmingly property damage than the actual George Floyd lynching itself, and that's what it is. And I see many of those in the white community absorbing this media, or who aren't anti-racist, should I say, aren't really try to understand others, just accept this and be more outraged over broken windows, burning cars, or stolen pocketbooks than death and suffering of human beings, systematic death and suffering of human beings. And there's this tendency to shut down and to condemn everything, and again, this muddies the issue. Property just is not the same as life. So focusing so much of the symptom of the problem instead of the root of the problem is missing the point, and it's going to prevent justice from being served for not only the victims of police brutality, but those who have or might have their property damaged in these protests and in any future protests. Okay, so we have to understand why this is occurring in the first place. As a matter of pure practicality, forget judgment at this moment. Constant attacks enabled by a broader social system against one community in particular will eventually lead to blowback if there's no significant civil avenues to do so. Let's look at Iraq. Okay, the United States invaded in 2003 off of faulty intelligence. Okay, so the Iraqis viewed us as foreign aggressors. There was not the majority of average Iraqis viewed us as assholes. Okay. Even if we didn't intend to be so, the effect is being an asshole. That does not change the fact that we're being an asshole. After we invaded, we got rid of the ability for the large Sunni minority to participate in their own government. Okay, the Ba'athist Party, the majority of which was made up of Sunnis, was banned from governance and in their military. Furthermore, their military was completely disbanded, so not only were Sunnis screwed over, we had Shias, which is the majority. They were screwed over as well, and if you're an average working class person, it tends to cause resentment. And we did not stop there. The United States put in a radical Shia prime minister who allowed his security forces to literally murder Sunnis in the streets, even when they peacefully organized and protested for their rights. The United States did not discriminate between civilians and suspects during searches. They threw many people in jail alongside actual violent jihadists, which tend to radicalize many. So the U.S. instituted systematic violence against a large group of people and got rid of every civil avenue possible for them to adequately address their grievances, which were many because we took away their means for economic security, for religious security, go down the list. So what happened? Anti-American insurgents started cropping up all over the country, many of whom took on a radical Sunni ideology. So if we continually, say, hey, pushing them towards radicals and cutting off their peaceful avenues, the radicals seem reasonable. And regardless of tactics, they were revolting against a foreign aggressor through war. Okay? Many, yes, did indiscriminately engage in violence and mass killings. That is not to excuse it. That is not my point. And we need to understand this if we're going to try and address the problem. This is purely from a practicality standpoint. So the U.S. responded again to some of these insurgents, regardless if they're terrorists or the violent jihadists we typically associate, or more freedom fighter rebellion types. We did not discriminate between them and actual civilians, and as a result, many civilians were killed, many homes were destroyed, and many cultural sites were eviscerated. And we have to keep in mind that cultural sites like mosques have a lot of emotional significance to Iraqis, and this isn't just an Iraqi thing. If someone blew up your fucking church, you'd be pretty pissed. Like, there is a emotional significance to that, and every culture has that to one degree or another, or unless you're a psychopath. So the opposition always had people to join the ranks because of the way in which Americans escalated the situation and conducted themselves recklessly. This resulted from a misunderstanding of their culture, not listening to the concerns of the people, as we only went to elites that could benefit our geopolitical goals. Okay, and we truly did we did not treat Iraqi lives like we would treat our own lives. We treated them as secondary, and that's the truth. There's many examples that we would bomb first, shoot first, ask questions later. That's just not valuing their lives the same way. It is what it is. If you look at the drone papers published by The Intercept, you will see how drone strikes are very inaccurate, but the point is, if we recklessly conduct ourselves and end up killing a lot of civilians, even if not intended, the perception of those people on the ground are going to look at us like assholes. We make the situation worse. We control what we do. So now I'm not blaming soldiers, but if the U.S. created all these secondary effects that we're complaining about, we cannot be outraged over those secondary effects. We reap what we sow. We created it, and this is not to condone those tactics and those secondary phenomena. If we really are pissed about the symptom of the problem, we must be pissed more so, or at least on par with the root of the problem, which we are not in this case of police brutality. My point in bringing up Iraq is to demonstrate that it is a natural response for people to get so fed up with being hurt and marginalized to a certain point to lash out in a way that is not ideal. And once an oppressed group feels desperate enough, tactics of rebellion will not begin to matter. Instead of just using vandalism or shooting at military targets, civilians may start to become targets as well. But let's keep in mind, I am making this parallel to Iraq, but that we are not in the same exact scenario here when we look at the United States. But genuine fervor among some protesters that results in vandalism or certain crimes, there is not generally a phenomenon of those who have experienced systematic oppression being so fed up to the point of where they're killing civilians on the street. There's not large amounts of, or even small amounts of black people or people of color who have suffered under our system going out and killing random white people. That's just not happening. And if you find some rare example of that, it's not even worth bringing up in the conversation because it is so exceptional.